$5,000 for defamation of character. Father cheated on your mother with her, and this affair produced her daughter, Stephanie. Told the truth about the affair, and the results of today's paternity test will clear your name.
Yes, Your Honor.
Karen Williams going around town telling people that my father fathered her child.
30 years. All this time.
From the time I was about 6 years old, this been going on with Miss Karen. Her followers in stores, workplaces.
Jobs, everywhere.
Everywhere.
That she is my father's daughter, and she's not.
And this is his daughter?
So you saying in 1994 is the first time you laid eyes on him?
Yes.
Did you know he was involved with their mother?
No.
And Ms. Love, how old are you?
35.
And Ms. Willis, how old are you?
33.
Oh.
In Judge Lake's courtroom, tension settles into the air long before any test result is opened. The atmosphere feels like a place where families come to confront decades of silence, unanswered questions, and stories no one wants to revisit. The people entering the courtroom today carry years of frustration, belief, denial, and determination. They don't come simply for answers. They come because their identities, reputations, and relationships have been shaped by rumors and allegations that have lingered far too long. As always, Judge Lake oversees everything with calm authority, searching for the delicate balance between law and justice, an issue often explored in the Truth Changes Everything podcast and the Game Changing Attorney podcast. But here, the conversation about the relationship between law and justice is not theoretical. It is lived, emotional, and raw. Two sisters enter the courtroom first, firm in their claim that another woman has spent decades destroying their family's name. They insist their father never fathered the woman who claims to be their sibling, and they present themselves as daughters fiercely guarding their family history. Judge Lake listens as they recount how, even in childhood, they were approached by strangers repeating claims that their father had cheated. These constant accusations, according to them, began shaping their family's story long before they were old enough to understand it. The sisters frame their case as defamation of character, asserting that the defendant has traveled around town, spreading a narrative they believe is entirely false. Their stance is confident and unwavering, and they expect the test to redeem their father's honor. On the other side stands a woman who believes just as firmly that she has told the truth for more than 3 decades. She insists she had a relationship with the sister's father, and that her daughter is the biological child of that man. To her, the courtroom represents closure. She is determined to prove that she has not lied, not exaggerated, and not fabricated anything. Her daughter stands beside her, shaped by years of being told one truth privately and another truth publicly. The daughter has carried a lifetime of confusion, unsure of why some people believed her story while others outright rejected her. For her, this case is not just about the man she believes is her father. It is about her place in the world. It is about identity. And as she expresses through her testimony, growing up without confirmation of her father's identity has created an internal conflict that the test might finally resolve. Judge Lake observes both sides closely, recognizing how often people regret taking a test, not because the science is at fault, but because the truth it reveals can destroy long-held beliefs. Yet in a courtroom like this one, the truth is necessary. It must surface, no matter how painful. The judge knows that test cheating stories, adoption stories, full episodes, and evidence stage in divorce case disputes all share one thing: the truth carries consequences. And the concept of justice in jurisprudence demands that those consequences be acknowledged, accepted, and understood. As testimonies unfold, the courtroom hears about an alleged past relationship, a mysterious yearbook message, conflicts over child support, stories of phone calls, accusations exchanged between mothers, claims of harassment, and a deceased father whose voice cannot be heard today. The discussion touches on the adverse inference in evidence act, because when a key witness is no longer alive, the court must rely solely on the evidence available, medical, written, or historical. Judge Lake repeatedly reminds everyone that speculation cannot stand in place of proof. A sample taken years ago through the coroner's office has become the only neutral witness in the room. Then the judge calls in a surprising witness, a man who claims to be the half-brother of all involved. He brings a new layer to the dispute, describing the father as a man who had multiple relationships. His testimony complicates the narrative the sisters have confidently presented. It also gives the daughter new hope. But Judge Lake knows that courtroom decisions cannot depend on hope, they depend on evidence. The presence of this witness reveals a family history far messier than the sisters wanted to admit, yet still not definitive enough to resolve the central question. Only the test can do that. The tension builds as Judge Lake prepares to read the results. The silence inside the room feels heavy. The sisters are confident they will be proven right. The daughter braces herself for what might be a life-changing revelation. The mother imagines the possibility of finally clearing her name. Meanwhile, Judge Lake holds the envelope, fully aware that the next few sentences will determine the emotional direction of every life in the room. And as she opens it, the courtroom becomes a place where truth stands above emotion. The result crushes one side and vindicates the other, but Judge Lake quickly shifts the focus away from celebration and humiliation. Her emphasis is compassion. She reminds the courtroom that some people regret taking tests because they uncover truths they never expected, and that the emotional consequences can be overwhelming. She encourages understanding instead of cruelty, especially toward the person who grew up believing a story told by her own mother. Judge Lake's approach reflects how the Divorce Course podcast often describes modern justice, not only about legal accuracy, but also about humanity. Just as the first conflict settles, another case unfolds before the courtroom can regain calm. A new couple enters, this time with a 2-year-old child at the center. The man denies paternity, insisting he was never told about the pregnancy until the child was already a year old. The woman, exhausted from raising a child alone, insists she informed him but was repeatedly blocked, ignored, or dismissed. Their case reveals the painful experiences many single parents face: lack of support, unstable living conditions, and emotional strain. The man believes the woman was involved with someone else during their relationship. The woman insists she was not. Both accuse each other of dishonesty and manipulation, showing how confusion and conflicting memories can distort the truth. Judge Lake carefully unpacks their story. She senses the desperation of a mother struggling with instability, a theme often shared in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where people discuss how uncertainty shapes their lives. She also sees the frustration of a man who feels tricked or shut out, similar to the emotional stories addressed in divorce and custody situations, which sometimes reach the Supreme Court child support level of complexity. But again, the issue at hand is not who yelled first or who blocked whom. It is the biological truth, and only the test can determine that. Throughout this testimony, Judge Lake repeatedly emphasizes responsibility. She stresses that sex is never a game, even though many people treat it as one. The courtroom becomes a place where the consequences of casual decisions, mistaken relationships, and unplanned pregnancies become painfully visible. Both parties describe ghosting, arguments, jealousy, doubt, and accusations, all common themes in test cheating stories. And once again, the judge prepares to read results that will end speculation and replace it with fact. When she finally reveals the truth, the courtroom reacts with shock, relief, and emotional release. The man learns that he is indeed the father, and the woman finds validation for the struggle she has endured alone. Judge Lake uses the moment to highlight accountability, parenting duty, and the importance of showing up for a child, emotionally, physically, and consistently. She reminds him that the test is only the beginning. The real test is the commitment that must follow. This entire courtroom session becomes a profound reflection of how truth, law, and justice intersect. In both cases, families arrive with long histories of hurt, suspicion, and unanswered questions. The tests settle the biological questions, but the emotional questions remain. Judge Lake guides each person through the aftermath with firmness and empathy, illustrating how the relationship between law and justice is not always perfect, but must always strive toward fairness. As the next stretch of court proceedings unfolds, Judge Lake continues guiding the room with the calm discipline of someone who understands how fragile family identity can be. The atmosphere remains thick with emotional weight. Even after one dispute has been resolved by test evidence, the echo of what the results meant for that family still lingers in the room. A daughter left without answers, sisters left grappling with old memories, and a mother forced to confront truths she resisted acknowledging. It becomes clear how often people regret taking tests, not because they doubt the science, but because the results rewire decades of belief. Judge Lake keeps reminding everyone that truth is not always gentle. The courtroom shifts focus to deeper discussions about responsibility, motives, emotional neglect, and parental duty. These cases reveal how the relationship between law and justice is constantly challenged by human complexity. In a purely legal sense, the test is straightforward. It gives a yes or no answer. But as the judge often explains, as many legal thinkers have in the concept of justice in jurisprudence, truth without compassion can cause damage. That is why she emphasizes empathy, even while delivering firm judicial direction. The man who has just discovered he is the father of a 2-year-old child sits quietly, processing a reality he tried to avoid for months. Judge Lake reminds him that denying responsibility does not make the problem disappear, especially when a child's future is involved. She draws from examples often heard in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, stories where people regret the choices they made while overwhelmed by fear, immaturity, or confusion. She uses these stories not to shame, but to teach. She stresses that becoming a parent means stepping into accountability, whether the circumstance was expected or not. The mother, emotionally drained, listens to the judge with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. She has struggled through unstable living conditions, unpredictable moves, financial tension, and emotional stress, all while raising a child alone. Her testimony resembles the stories shared on the Divorce Course podcast, where parents describe trying to navigate relationships broken by distrust, financial hardship, and emotional turbulence. The judge sees in her the desperation of someone who has been hopping for support that never came. In her trembling voice and the uncertainty in her stories, there is a subtle reflection of many adoption stories' full episodes. Children searching for a sense of identity and adults searching for a sense of duty. Judge Lake continues reminding the father that avoidance, blocking communication, or assuming the worst does not dissolve biological truth. She explains that when the evidence stage in divorce case disputes intersects with test cheating stories, the courtroom becomes the only place where clarity can take root. She highlights how the adverse inference in Evidence Act often applies in situations involving incomplete cooperation or missing testimony. But here, because both parties are present and the evidence is clear, there is no space for speculation. She commands him to step into fatherhood with integrity. The courtroom then transitions into the broader implications of truth revealed by science. Judge Lake reflects briefly, in her signature judicial style, on how truth, no matter how disruptive, can reshape lives but also rebuild them. The father acknowledges, slowly and silently, that denying involvement was rooted in fear and mistrust. The mother begins to feel the emotional weight lifting, as if a long-standing storm has finally cracked open to reveal sun behind the clouds. Their case becomes a reminder that when truth emerges, it clears paths that once seemed impossible. But the day's work is far from over. Judge Lake calls the next matter, and more individuals enter the room, each carrying a different burden and a different story shaped by uncertainty, rumor, and broken trust. The nature of this docket seems to reflect the evolving definition of family in society: blended households, separated parents, contested paternity claims, forgotten promises, and unresolved histories. Each case reveals how fragile bonds can be when truth is unknown. Each case also illustrates how quickly relationships deteriorate when communication fails. This time, the courtroom is introduced to a marriage passing through the severe stress of separation. Both parties claim the other is withholding crucial information. Their conflict has reached a point where accusations have replaced communication. Judge Lake identifies this pattern instantly. She has seen it countless times in divorce cases where even the smallest misunderstandings become weapons. They describe the early stages of their relationship, where love once guided their decisions. But now, they stand on opposite sides of the courtroom, bitterly describing regret, betrayal, and distance. The dispute involves questionable timelines, unexpected behavior, and suspicions that trace back months. The wife insists she has been honest, while the husband claims she has important details that could impact the future of their marriage. As they argue, the tension between them grows heavier, revealing the emotional exhaustion both feel. Judge Lake observes the deeper layers: fear of abandonment, fear of humiliation, and fear of losing control. All of these emotions echo themes explored in Truth Changes Everything podcast episodes, where personal truths that have been hidden for years eventually come to the surface. Their marriage has reached a stage where a test has become part of the conflict, even though the issue is not directly about paternity. Instead, the question revolves around trust, loyalty, and a timeline they cannot agree on. The husband claims he no longer believes anything his wife says. The wife insists she is being unfairly blamed. Their arguments carry the emotional strain of people who once cared for each other deeply but now communicate like strangers. Judge Lake reminds them that their case is a reflection of how quickly fear can distort truth and how easily assumptions replace facts. The couple's story highlights issues similar to those explored by family courts across the country. When the judge asks questions about financial support, an entire conversation begins about expectations, obligations, and disappointments. Discussions about living arrangements, joint responsibilities, communication failures, and accusations of dishonesty fill the courtroom. These issues echo the intense battles seen in Supreme Court child support cases, where even legally mandated responsibilities become tangled in emotional conflict. Judge Lake emphasizes repeatedly that marriage cannot survive on accusations alone. Law cannot repair emotional damage, and the court cannot decide feelings. The couple's testimonies reveal how deeply fear can manipulate memory. They describe misunderstandings with conflicting accounts, each insisting their version is accurate. Their situation reflects the painful gap between law and justice. From the legal standpoint, documents, communication logs, and timelines can establish facts. But from the emotional standpoint, both individuals feel betrayed. This is where the relationship between law and justice becomes most strained. As more details surface, the judge becomes aware that their conflict includes past counseling attempts, arguments triggered by insecurity, and confrontations sparked by old wounds. The judge references the importance of understanding personal patterns, something often discussed in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, as individuals describe how unresolved trauma affects present behavior. She explains to them that a courtroom cannot fix the emotional roots of their issues, but it can provide clarity about responsibilities and legal truth. The couple begins to express fears they previously never articulated to one another, fears of failure, fears of dishonor, and fears of losing their family identity. The wife describes emotional exhaustion from constantly needing to defend her intentions. The husband describes the sinking feeling of believing he was misled. Judge Lake, accustomed to navigating such emotional terrain, keeps the focus on truth and accountability rather than personal attacks. The judge introduces legal principles that apply to their dispute, including how the Adverse Inference in Evidence Act might apply if one partner withholds relevant communication or documentation. She explains that in situations of marital breakdown, especially when one partner accuses the other of dishonesty, transparency becomes essential. She instructs them to focus on reconstructing facts rather than assumptions. Their exchange continues with emotional intensity. The courtroom becomes a space where two people finally express the truths they avoided saying to each other outside of the court. Judge Lake listens patiently, guiding them away from hostility and toward grounded clarity. She reminds them that the goal is not to win an argument, but to understand what is real. Their case stands as an example of why the court system exists: to uncover truth, stabilize conflict, and provide structure where communication has broken down. The couple begins to see that their issue is not simply a disagreement, but a fundamental disconnect in trust. Whether their marriage can survive is uncertain, but the judge ensures they leave with a clearer understanding of what their next steps must be. As the last portion of testimony begins, the courtroom takes on a quieter, more reflective tone. After hearing multiple families confront decades of doubt, the weight of unresolved truth has accumulated in the air. Judge Lake sits with the same consistent posture of authority she has held throughout the proceedings, fully aware that these final conversations will require as much emotional sensitivity as legal clarity. She has witnessed families break, heal, and redefine themselves in this room. Now she prepares to conclude a day defined by complicated stories, tests, and emotional revelations. The couple before her continues explaining their fractured trust. Both look worn from months of disputes, accusations, and emotional distance. They describe fears of being misunderstood, fears of losing their home, and fears of raising their children in a climate of constant argument. Their conflict mirrors the situations discussed in the Divorce Course podcast, stories of marriages strained by miscommunication, assumptions, and the painful reality that love alone cannot solve everything. Judge Lake encourages them to understand that truth, just like the legal system, does not always bring comfort. Sometimes people regret taking tests or opening old wounds because the truth reveals issues they were not emotionally ready to face. But avoidance only prolongs the damage. She reminds them that healing requires facing reality directly, even when it hurts. Their arguments drift once again into conflicting memories. Who said what? Who misunderstood what? Who acted first? These recollections contradict each other with increasing intensity, demonstrating how emotional wounds distort perception. Judge Lake refocuses their attention calmly, urging them to step away from assumptions and concentrate on verifiable facts. She explains that the evidence stage in divorce case matters operates best when emotional interpretation is separated from objective documentation. The law is designed to evaluate facts, not feelings, even though both influence family conflict. Their story slowly becomes clearer. Unresolved feelings from the past, jealousy that escalated into suspicion, and broken communication that led them to live like strangers. The judge notices that much of their conflict resembles the emotional threads woven into Tess' cheating stories: fear of betrayal, fear of dishonesty, and fear of discovering a painful truth. These fears can both motivate and damage relationships. The husband admits he carried fears he never expressed. His silence led him to assume the worst, transforming every disagreement into a potential threat. The wife admits she felt overwhelmed and unsupported, sensing that no matter what she said, suspicion would shadow her truth. Their admissions offer the judge insight into how both partners contributed to the emotional distance. She emphasizes that accountability requires courage from both sides.